Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the Lindsay Elmore Show. Cancer can be so scary, but I hope this episode can inspire you to realize that cancer diagnoses are no longer always terminal. We're going to be talking with an emergency physician who wrote a book on cancer that helps people navigate the issues surrounding cancer care, including their finances, the legal aspects, the workplace issues, and interpersonal issues. Kerry Forrestal hopes to convey the message that these are hopeful times in cancer care, and we are in the fourth great age of cancer treatment. We want to help people understand how they can use complementary and integrative medicines versus how to know if they're just getting frauded. Plus, we want to talk about the exceptional value of early detection in helping you to conquer cancer. This is The Lindsay Elmore Show. Welcome to The Lindsay Elmore Show, a podcast for people who deserve to be healthy, with honest, open, and enlightening conversations with doctors, thought leaders, creatives, and spiritual gurus. You'll walk away with simple and tangible tips and tricks that allow you to live your healthiest life so you can pursue your dreams, overcome obstacles, and leave your mark. Dr. Kerry Forrestal began his medical career at the age of 16 with his local American Legion ambulance and became New York's youngest certified EMTs at the age of 18. He earned degrees in biology and psychology from Binghamton University, followed by an MBA. He has also served with the New York Air National Guard, focusing on diversity and inclusion. Pursuing his passion for medicine, he earned his MD from the Renaissance School of Medicine at Stony Brook University. There, he launched the Career Cultural Competence Project to promote cultural understanding in healthcare. After completing his residency at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital, Dr. Forrestal became board certified in emergency medicine and has spent over 20 years as an attending physician, educator, and advocate for patient care. Dr. Forrestal has contributed to international medical missions, including in Haiti and South Africa, and he facilitates exchange programs between Ireland and the U.S. In addition to academic publications, he has written science fiction, a 2-act play, and articles for Conquer, The Patient's Voice. He teaches at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, serves as president-elect of the Maryland College of Emergency Physicians, and hosts a health segment for NPR affiliate WHCP. His first nonfiction book on patient-centered cancer care, positively reviewed by the ASCO Post, reflects his commitment to empowering patients and advancing medical education. Dr. Kerry Forrestal, welcome to the Lindsay Elmore Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am very excited about our conversation today, not only about career cultural competence, but really, why would an ER doctor write a book about cancer? It seems so far out of the realm of your scope of practice and what you would be dealing with on a daily basis. Why did you write this book?
So I get that question a lot as an ER doctor, and it's primarily 3 reasons. It's a 3-part answer. So the first is we find a lot of it in the emergency department. You know, people come in for different, I have a cough, or in one case, a gentleman thought he had injured his shoulder playing golf. He was a gentleman in his 70s, and he said, this shoulder, took an x-ray, and there was the lung cancer from his many years of smoking. So it's always, it's never sat right with me to say, you have this really terrible problem. Good luck with that. So I wanted to do something. I looked for a book, actually, that I could recommend to my patients to say, look, this is your Bible. This is what you need to do moving forward from this point. And I couldn't find it. So friends of mine advocated that I write it, and after a while pounding it through my thick skull, I went ahead and I wrote it. So the second is, where do you go when things go wrong? Cancer care is incredibly complicated, and unfortunately, with our healthcare insurance being what it is, everybody doesn't get the care that they need. And the emergency department is the safety net for the United States. This is where people come when things go wrong or when they can't get what they need. So we see a lot of it, and some of it, with good information and understanding of your resources, is avoidable. Because the last place somebody who's on these chemotherapeutic drugs and immunosuppressant drugs wants to be is in my emergency department with MRSA, VRE, COVID, C. diff, all of that. And then the third part, of course, it's a very, very, cancer runs very strongly in my family. So my grandmother had uterine cancer in the early part of the 20th or the mid part of the 20th century, when the only treatment was to pack her uterus with radium pellets, and she survived. She went through 2 rounds of that and she survived. My grandfather had bladder cancer. He was a Con Edison electrical worker down there with all the PCBs. So he got the bladder cancer that we know now is connected to that. And they didn't really have much to offer him. Mother had 3 bouts of lung cancer, didn't die of it, died with it. Father, skin cancer, and on and on and on. So it's always been something of nothing else gets us. We don't have heart. We don't have stroke. We have cancer.
I love what you just said. She didn't die of it. She died with it. What's the differentiation?
So more and more, especially if we can get at a cancer early, it's becoming less of a terminal illness and more it can become something that's chronic, something that you will live with, like hypertension or diabetes, and you'll be on medication long term for it, but it will not end your life. And we're getting better and better at it not having affect your quality of life. So people are on long-term therapy, for example, for certain types of breast cancer, for certain types of prostate cancer. With monitoring, people have melanomas. They pop up and they take care of them, skin cancers. My father said, I don't know how many bouts of skin cancer, and he's 100 years old. We just celebrated his 100th. So it's one of those things that, it's a scary word in our society. When you say cancer, everything shuts off to people. But more and more, we're winning more than we're losing. So people, we're hoping to get to a point where even bad cancers become more of an annoyance. I mean, HIV back in the day was, oh my God, it's over. And it was, it was a bad scene. I practiced, before I went to medical school, I was in EMS. And I practiced in the day where that was that scary thing. Nobody knew how you got it. Now it's Bitcarby or whatever else, and people just go on with their lives, and it's an annoyance. So, hopefully we get to the point where that's all it is.
Do you feel, because one of the things that interested me so much about the questions that you wanted to be asked were about fraud in medical care. And do you think that there is a cover-up? Some people think, if you believe the conspiracy theories about HIV, do you think that there is a way that we can actually prevent cancer that's not being given to us?
So the thing about, it's always interesting the way people perceive that medical research works and the way it actually works. So for example, let's go off medicine here for a second to climate change. Now, most people there are some people who will go, okay, they're all together and they're saying this when it's really this. And they think that scientists cooperate. And the truth of the matter is, with scientific research, it's more like Game of Thrones, where here's how this works. Or maybe even, I don't know if you're of an age to remember Highlander. Okay. If I take your head, I take your power, right? So if I can prove you wrong, I get your glory, for lack of a better word. So if I can disprove what you're asserting, I write myself into the books. So if, for example, Watson Crick and Rosalind Franklin, right? I will never not say Rosalind Franklin's name in there because she should have gotten a Nobel Prize. And they're like, oh, she's dead now, she can't. There are rules. Adjust your rules. Give the lady her Nobel Prize. So in any case, if I can prove that it's not DNA, that it's whatever, I write myself into the history books. There is a famous, I don't know if it's famous to other people, but NPR did this great bit about this argument that came about with the entomologists, the guys who studied bugs. And the argument, and it was a bitter one, these guys hated each other, was about when a flea jumps, does the power come from the knee or does it come from the ankle? Right? And these guys went at it. And the funny thing when they did the end of the article is it said this must be NPR because they're talking about this. But that's how research actually works, is everybody trying to disprove everybody else. And if you've ever sat in on a scientific meeting where they're debating something, you cannot get the level of cooperation that you would need to pull off a conspiracy theory, one of these conspiracy things. So there are things that, that different corporations involved with healthcare are doing that they're not really conspiracy theories because we've got them out in the daylight. This whole thing about the algorithmic denial of insurance claims, where they were saying, oh, no, we never do that. We never did. We got you dead to rights. We know you're doing it. So, conspiracy theories in medicine, modern medicine, I don't know how you'd hide it. Scientists are not a cooperative group.
No, they are not. And since you're going to throw out Rosalind Franklin, I've got to throw out Frances Kelsey, who was the woman who stood up to the FDA and said, we are not bringing thalidomide to the United States. I think that she does not get enough credit where credit is due. I have a special interest in drug pricing and drug price negotiations and how the United States really doesn't have a good handle on this. And we're starting to wrangle it, but the entire law could be stricken down. You talk a lot about identifying fraud. How do you do that in medical care?
So the first thing look for in my framework, the first thing I look for, is when somebody comes at me initially saying, this is what they don't want you to know. That actually is a signal. That hangs a lantern on it to say, okay, why wouldn't they want me to know? Is there financial, all like that? And then I look at the credentials of the person saying it. So, for example, there was this Jilly Juice. I don't know if you saw this. Dr. Phil did a whole thing on it. This woman came in and said, this will cure everything under the sun. And what it was hypertonic saline. And it was actually damaging. It caused cerebral edema in some patients and all like that.
Oh, it can be deadly. It can be a deadly drug.
It did kill a couple of people. It absolutely did. And you look at the behaviors around it. So, for example, one of our medics here locally just this past month called me in a bit of a panic. He says, my family wants to take my father down. He has stage 4 pancreatic cancer that's failed therapy, and he wants to bring him to a clinic in Mexico to receive, coffee enemas and all of these things, none of which have been proven to work. And the family was very insistent. They brought him down. He got incredibly sick. He came back and died a couple of days later. So it may well have hastened his demise. He may have had things that he wanted to think and say and do in those last days that he was denied because he went somewhere where he didn't get any of the proper care. If he'd gone into hospice, we know that hospice extends life. Not hugely. We're not talking about years, not even months, but you get quality days and weeks out of it that you can spend with your family and do whatever. So, you look for the inauthenticities, if that's a word, where it doesn't quite ring true. And anytime somebody can't back it up with numbers, you have to start to go, why? Now, there's this perception that medicine doesn't like natural things, right? If it's natural, you can't use that. I'm an ER doctor, and I see thousands of patients of a year, and I use natural medicines all the time. I give patients penicillin. That is a natural product made from an extract of mold. I use aspirin in all of my cardiac patients. That's salicylic acid. That's from the bark of forget which tree right now.
Willow.
Say it again?
The willow tree.
Yes, you are correct. Very good. You go to medical school now.
Thank you.
Digoxin, right, from foxglove, used in heart failure. Not as much anymore, but still, it is used out there. You've got caffeine. It prevents cerebral hemorrhage in neonates. You've got morphine, right, one of our go-to medications. All of these are natural medications, but you have to put the numbers behind it. And then some people say, well, we don't have the money in the alternate medicine universe. It's a multi-million no, correction, I apologize, multi-billion dollar industry. They have the money, so do the research. You prove to me that something works, I'll use it.
I mean, it goes back to if you were to try to bring acetaminophen, Tylenol to market these days, you could prove that it could break a fever, but can you prove that it's actually going to help pain? That would be a very, very difficult road. Now, let's get back to cancer, and I want to go back to what you said were one of your top 3 reasons why you talk about cancer. What do you do? What is the first step that someone with a new diagnosis of cancer needs to do?
Right. So in the book that we wrote, that I wrote, Crushing Cancer, Patient's Complete Guide to Managing a Cancer Diagnosis, the very first thing that you do is nothing. Right? So that's the very first thing that you do.
And why is that?
So when people are hit with such a life-altering diagnosis, right? You've joined a very unfortunate club, a club nobody ever wants to be in, right? And it turns your whole world upside down in a word, right? When you go from being a person who may or may not have a problem to a cancer patient, you have entered a new world. And you have to be very deliberate about how you move forward from those first steps, because the things that you do will propagate through the care. So there's a saying, you remember the old saying, don't just stand there, do something. We have a phrase in the emergency department, don't just do something, stand there. Nail your feet to the floor. Think about what you have to do. Trauma comes in, heart guy comes in, septic patient comes in. You think about all of it. Because if I focus on this one little area and I make a decision, I can mess up everything else. So the first thing you do is nothing. You don't give anything away. You don't make any commitments. You don't do anything. You sit down, you take a breath, you get a wingman. If I had to say there was any first step, you get a wingman. You get somebody who can hear the doctor. My brother-in-law had prostate cancer. And he said when they dropped that word on him, cancer, it became like the peanuts. The only thing he could hear from the doctor was wah, 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 wah. He got nothing. But my sister was with him, and she's an accountant to her core, and she just started taking down notes. She got everything down. And that would be, I think, the first thing. But don't do the big holiday. Don't spend a lot of money going, oh, it's all over. Chances are with cancer, more and more, and especially if you get it earlier and earlier, you're going to survive. The thing is that we have to keep you from being financially toxic. Right? I think it was something 42% of all cancer patients are going to lose their life savings within 2 years of getting the diagnosis. Right? There's a large percentage who will become bankrupt, and a number of others will have what's called financial toxicity, where they are having to pay their medical bills in a way that negatively affects their living standards. So, all of these things are important, and even survival, where you come out of the gate or how you come out of the gate can affect your survival.
Thinking about how expensive cancer can be, how can patients safely and effectively navigate getting through that maze of I want the care, and yet maybe I can't afford the care, and what is my legacy that I leave afterwards if I do die with cancer?
Right. So I would say the way to get through it, this is in Crushing Cancer, we go through a lot of this, like how do you plan? First, the cash you have is the very last thing you go near. All right. So make sure that you understand there are a lot of resources. There's a group called the Nurse Navigators, Oncology Nurse Navigators, and you absolutely want to take advantage of that program. These are the Sherpa guides. These are the people who know the lay of the land. They know where to get the resources. There is something called the Social Security Blue Book, all right, where they will define some cancers automatically qualify you for additional insurances, right, for Medicare or Medicaid. A surprising number of them don't. I think that's nonsense. I think if you have cancer, you should automatically qualify. I don't care if it's a stage 1 skin cancer or stage 4, pancreatic cancer. If you get that cancer diagnosis, you should get a whole set of financial protections, in my view. And one of them should be Medicare automatically. Should happen automatically. But it doesn't. So make sure that you get what you deserve or what you're entitled to from Medicare, Medicaid. There's a great system called the 211 system. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not.
It's amazing to me how cool this is and how unknown it is, because that is always the answer I get is, no, I haven't heard of that. If you dial 211, right? We all know 411, 911, 211, anywhere in the United States, you give them your zip code and you tell them your need. They will have a list of what the resources are local to you. So I tried this when I was writing Crushing Cancer to say, I called them up. I said, look, I hope this isn't an emergency line. I'm writing a book. I told them what I was doing. If, let's say, I was going through cancer care and I needed to pay my electric bill, what could you do for me in this zip code? And I'm in the ER, we do a lot of this, trying to marrying people with resources. So I know what the resources are, and they nailed every single one of them. And when I said, okay, and I'm a vet, I was with the 106 there rescuing. What does that do for me? And then they came up with a couple more, and they were right on the money. So 211 is another way to get resources for patients. If you need to keep your electrical bill, keep the lights on, keep the roof over the head. There's the Pink Fund, which helps people who have breast cancer specifically with their mortgages for a period of time. And there are tons of services like this. There are a lot of services that will help you keep the lights on, pay the bills. So don't think that you have to do it out of your pocket. There are services there, and the last thing you touch is your money.
Well, and special shout out to 988, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Another great number just to have in the back of your mind. You sound super hopeful about the future of cancer care. What makes you so hopeful?
Well, I've been at this now 45 years between EMS and I know I don't look it now. Yes, I do. I've been at it since 79, in EMS for 17 years. And then I went to medical school when I was 33. So having watched the arc of this, where, my grandfather didn't stand a chance. He was 1970. He had this up till now. We are now living in the fourth great age of cancer care, right? First age was surgery. If something big bump, you cut it out. And that was about the most you could hope for. And over the years, as we got better and better with surgery, we got anesthesia, we got antisepsis, we became very good at cutting cancers out, but that's not always a cure. Then came along Madame Curie, right? One of the only women to win Nobels in two different areas, right? So she won in physics and chemistry, and the radium thing, and then radiation, brachytherapy was born. That's second great age. Third, Stanley Farber, right? Stanley Farber was actually a pediatric pathologist who came up with an idea to say, hey, if I give leukemia kids one type of medicine, it'll cure the leukemia. He actually got it wrong and off the kids much quicker. So they gave him another shot at it, and he got it right, and thus was born chemotherapy. But the person who created chemotherapy was actually a pathologist, guy who studies tissues after they're taken out of the body. But we're now in the fourth great age, immunotherapy. We're training our own systems to go after the cancer. There are what are called oncolytic viruses. You know how hepatitis goes after the liver? Well, there are viruses that go after only melanoma, right? We're training our T cells, those little, the antibodies and T cells, to go after the cancers in our body. We take out a little bit of the cancer. We train our T cells how to go after it. We put the T cells back in. And then not only does it go after the cancer, you've got a memory cell, if this thing comes back, to go after it again. So immunotherapy is an enormous cause for hope. And if your listeners go away with anything, if this happens to you, if this does, God forbid, you should be hopeful. You should be ready for a fight. We're getting from a place, and I always love to say this, where people go cancer, oh no, to cancer, oh yeah? And they're ready for the fight, because it's a fight, and one that we're winning more and more and more.
We have discussed vaccinations that are in development that are specifically targeted for cancer. And so immunotherapy is really, truly important. Most of our listeners are going to want to know more about how do we integrate the natural and the chemo and the radiation and the surgery, because I feel like there's such a divide where you can be one or the other. You can only do one or the other, but that's not the case. Talk to us about how you integrate different modalities into your practice.
Sure. So for it's an arbitrary division because it's I'll tell you very quickly about an experience I had in China. We went as a delegation for emergency medicine. Right now, we're going there to look at how the Chinese do their medicine. And I remember being brought to Beijing Hospital number whatever. It was very fancy. And they bring us down to the pharmacy, and this guy puts this script down on the table at the pharmacy, and there were burlap bags. And the guy comes along and he grabs a handful of dried scorpion, a handful of bay leaves, and a couple of other things. He says, grind this up, make it into a tea, and do that for 7 days. And whatever I don't know what the problem the guy had was. And he says, and that should do it. And the first glance you go like, scorpions and bay leaves? Excuse me? Then you have to remember, right? Because we're people who are a little more open-minded about this sort of thing. The Chinese live a couple years longer than we do. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. There's lifestyle and there's diet and there's, all those things. But still, you have to go, what's there? So when I talk, it's with that framework in mind, that there's more than what we know and we should be open to it. So arbitrarily divide the world up into three places. You got the kind of mainstream medicine. I'm an allopath. A lot of my colleagues who practice the same way are osteopaths, right? So that's that world. It's where we do Taxol and we do, Keytruda and Keytruda rather and all like that. There's complementary medicine, things that have been, let's say, come from way, way back when, right? But they've been scientifically proven to improve things. Chiropractic has helped quality of life in patient with cancer, right? Acupressure, acupuncture, moxibustion. All of these things have been shown scientifically to improve the life of cancer patients. Then you come into the alternate medicine, where somebody says, for example, mistletoe infusions will cure cancer. Well, they've been shown to have anti-cancer effect, right? There are some studies, but they have not been shown yet to improve the longevity or the outcome in cancer patients. When they do, okay, then you move over. You come into more of the mainstream. Until they do, that's not something that we can integrate just because we like it, right? So if you go over here into the alternate medicine, the only thing I would say, make sure that your oncologist that you hired to take care of your cancer knows about it, because there are some things that will fight it, right? That you don't want the two fighting each other, right? The two types of medicine fighting each other. So if you are taking some supplement, if you're whatever, I would break down complementary and alternative medicine this way. If you get home from a rough day of chemo and you light a lavender candle and it helps relax you, right? That's complementary medicine. If you think the lavender candle will cure your cancer, that's alternative medicine to me, right? Mm-hmm. But again, I'm an allopath. So like I said, you can do this, but make sure that your guy knows you're doing this so that you don't work against your own ends. So that's how I would address that.
It's fascinating. We've never brought up mistletoe injections on the show. And my mom was a surgical nurse my whole life. And one of the most impactful patients that she ever told me about was because the surgical oncologist broke the law and gave mistletoe injections. And so it is cutting edge to think about incorporating a lot of these cultural and alternative medicines into cancer care. I'd like to talk next about your thoughts on death, because that's kind of where we started. And dealing with cancer does feel like a death sentence. And I loved your body language that you had when you said, oh, cancer, kind of bring it. I can handle this. And yet it does bring people to their demise. As an ER physician, how have you had to handle that over your career? And what have you learned about what people want, regret, long for at the end of their life?
Sure. So let me break this up into two parts. First, I so culturally, I want to move off that notion that cancer brings death, right? All the great books that have been written, Gilda Radner, It's Always Something, Every Day I Fight by Scott, Brian's Song, The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch, amazing books, and everybody dies in the end. So we have this cultural, right? Makes for a great movie, makes for a great book. Everybody cries at the end. Okay, go for coffee. But that's not the truth of it. The truth of it is we have more and more and more cancer survivors. 2 million people will get cancer this year. They'll be diagnosed. Maybe about 600,000 of them will die. Okay? But then you carry that 1.6 million survivors over to the next year. You add on another 2 million, and 600,000 will die. And then you take that remainder of the 3.2 million, and you add on another 2 million and 600. The rule is survival. Early detection, you get your colonoscopy, you do your breast exams, you do all of that stuff. Survival is the rule with cancer, right? The exception is that we die, but it's a very dramatic death, right? And we come from a place where cancer was a death sentence, just like HIV was a death sentence, or hepatitis was a death sentence down the road, right? So that's the first thing is break that in your head, to break that cancer equals death, because it doesn't. Now, we all do know that we're going to have to die. For me, I'm all about, there's a Canadian poet by the name of Atticus who said, I want to arrive to my death late, drunk, and then love. So, and I'm like, I'm with that, so the things when people come to the end of life, nobody ever wanted to spend more time at work. It's that whole thing. The people who are, if you're living your life, I would say it this way: live your life now, so that when you get to that last moment and that last conscious thought, you aren't like, oh God, why? Like, get to there where you go like, that was a great ride. That was fantastic. I don't know what comes next. I have my thoughts, but it comes to us all. And I want to be there in a way to go like, I can't have asked for more.
I heard a preacher say one time, I just want to die while preaching. I heard a man say one time, I just want to die while being in the midst of intimacy with the person I love the most.
It's a little hard on the person you're with. We actually had a medic had that happen, and it was hard on her. It's a poor thing. So her husband literally died while they were,
while they were in the midst of intimacy. Absolutely. I mean, it's happened to more than one woman and more than one man. I am absolutely sure. Tell us who the perfect person is to read your book.
Well, 3 groups. One, person who has cancer, of course. And I think the most powerful thing anybody said to me with the book, I'm an ER guy, so I'm used to surprises kind of just popping up, right? And I mean, I literally, just a couple of years ago, we had a mass shooting, and the people from the mass shooting all piled into a car, and they literally all walked through the front door together, right? And then one came in.
Quick shout out to Quick Clot, which we have talked about on the show before. We interviewed the inventors of it. Quick Clot is one of those things that I just don't think enough people know about that can stop bleeding in its tracks. It's used by the military, it's used by police forces, and it is something in my medicine cabinet all the time.
Yeah, we're definitely fans. So, but I was at a party with somebody who had given it to their mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law came up with breast cancer. She was just a nervous wreck about the whole thing, and she survived. She did great. And I get a tap on my shoulder. I turn around, and there's this lady who I've never laid eyes on before. And she said, I just wanted to thank you for your book. It took away my fear. Mm-hmm. And that I was like, what do you say to that? So the person who
you say thank you.
So, and I did. I definitely appreciated it, but I probably babbled. It's the person who is like, what do I do now? Where do I go? How do I manage this? What's next? Every step of it is just laid out, because I have seen for the last 46 years the path that people have to take and how they succeed and how they fail. Then the second group of people would be the people who love people who have cancer. The person who's trying to figure out, this thing is happening. There are ways in which the cancer diagnosis is harder on them because while they're not threatened, they're also kind of idle. Like, how do I help? What do I do? When somebody we love is in trouble, we want to do something about it. So there's a lot in there for what you can do to help. We talk a whole chapter on just, what does the caregiver do? And then finally, the professionals. This was not my target audience, but it turns out that, nurse navigators and the oncology nurses and even the PAs, NPs, and physicians, are getting use out of this book for basically saying, like, okay, look, right here, it says, you need to do this, that, and the other thing. So those would be the three groups of people. Pretty much 2 million people a year and their families and their providers need the book.
I want to ask you something that may be controversial, but childhood cancer and the desire of parents to not go through chemo, not go through radiation, to do things alternatively can sometimes lead to legal issues. And you talk about how do we not only financially navigate cancer, but how do we legally navigate cancer? What are some of the pitfalls that people fall into, and how can we ensure that our cancer care doesn't cause us legal problems?
Sure. So it's very, very difficult to deal with cancer, period. Dealing with it in your child, you're going to lose your mind more than once. There's just no way not to. As a physician taking care of children who have cancer who come into the emergency department, I would have to say I do see, for the most part, people, it's sometimes hard to face realities of cancer care. Sometimes it does not go well. We actually had a dear friend whose child was a classmate of my daughter's, and she came up with glioblastoma, I believe it was. And they did great, but there were a lot of things that they had to do that they did not want to do. And the thing that just appalls me with some of these people who approach parents with kids with cancer, they will sing you a sweet song. They will tell you, yep, these guys won't, we've got what you need. And they lead them away from what could have potentially been a cure. And again, I'm not an anti anything. You prove to me, you show me numbers, you show me effect. Okay, it's on the team. But some of these guys, just like the Jilly Juice, it's pure malarkey, and they'll kill kids, and then they'll turn around when you say, "Well, it didn't work." You say, "Well, if you come to me sooner, it's always somebody else's fault with you. If you come to me first, I would have saved your child, but you didn't." So it's that sort of thing. It is one of the hardest things to do to face the reality of cancer in a child. But if most parents get there, and use the help to get there, don't ever think cancer is an impossible thing to do alone. Certainly more so with your child, but find the people who can help get you there. If you're thinking about doing something that's really off book, and you'll know it in your head, but just find somebody to nail your feet to the ground and say, what is the reality of this? If let's use Jilly Juice again. We really shouldn't give her airtime, but let's use the whatever juice. Show me your cures. Connect me with the people who have documented cases of cancer, my cancer, right? And show me where your thing worked. Put me in contact with these people, a lot of them, right? Not just one, not just two. I want thousands.
It's a strong word that you used, appalled. As we close, let's talk a little bit more about what you think the value of early detection of cancers is, and what should people be doing at what age?
Sure. Early detection, every one that you look at there's a survival matrix online. And I will tell you, first of all, don't look at it. right? People go online and say, oh, I have a stage 1, whatever. I have this chance. This is not Vegas. People don't come with expiration dates. Don't handicap it. That
It's
was
one
not
of
what
the
this
things
was.
that drives me crazy is when a physician tells someone, you have a month to live, you have 3 months to live. Like, who decided that?
Yeah, it's always, people always ask you for the number. What are my chances? And it's, it's a best guess at very best, it's a best guess. Somebody comes in with a heart attack. What are my chances? Yeah, really good. Give me a number. Really good. I mean, people, if we get to them while they're still alive, their chances are fantastic anymore that they're going to survive heart attack, that they're going to, it's going to go okay. And we lose from time to time, but by and large, we win. So there's that. To go back, not to get too far off, there's that grid. Stage 1 has this percentage, stage 2, this percentage. The earlier on you are, the better off you're going to do. That trend is actually true. So the early detections, you get your colonoscopy. If you're low risk, you can do Cologuard. Colonoscopy is really, though, is the gold standard. You're going to be starting, depending on your risk factors, 40, 50. Mammograms, depending on your age and breast density, there's been a change. I think it's gone down to 40. I'd have to check on that one. There is now...
I can confirm it's 40.
Okay. There's this really neat new technology that's coming along that are called liquid biopsies. So cancer cells will shed DNA and RNA, and it's a giveaway, and it sheds it into the blood. So it's not the cancer cells are in the blood, it's the DNA or RNA from these cancer cells that are telltale for an individual type of cancer. And they can actually take a blood sample and culture it for, or test it for those DNA fragments. So we're getting to the point of having liquid biopsies for cancers. So just yearly checkups. People are like, oh, well, I'm only 30. There's an increasing number of cancers under 50. And a lot of it goes, we've been hearing a lot about, there are microplastics in the environment. We know that anything foreign is going to cause inflammation in the body. Cancer is, every time a cell turns over, it has a chance for that little thing that tells it to stop growing, breaks. So if you have more inflammation, you have more cell turnover, more opportunities for cancer to arise. We are doing a lot now in looking about how the ultra-processed foods are affecting cancer incidence. So there are a lot of pressures, environmental and nutritional, that are causing cancer in younger and younger people. So when somebody says, oh, I'm 30 or I'm 40 and I'm not doing my yearly checkups, why?
Yeah.
It's 15 minutes in the doctor's office. He looks you over. He says, what's going on? I just lost 30 pounds. I have no idea why. That's going to set off the antenna on the doctor in half a heartbeat.
Well, I mean, and I gotta say, me going to an annual pap smear takes me about 5 hours. It is a very long process, and it's not always just 15 minutes. As we wrap up, everybody, I want you to go to crushingcancerthebook.com to get your hands on this book, especially if you are someone with cancer, someone who loves someone with cancer, or if you are a professional in any setting within the medical industry. Kerry, I got to ask you, the work you do is not easy. What keeps you going?
It's moment to moment. When you walk in, and you have to really like chaos to be in an ER, especially a trauma center. We're a trauma center in Maryland. We do 90,000 visits a year. And take somebody from a place of fear and uncertainty, to a place where they go, okay, all right, this is going to be all right. And, you get that, it's in the tone of the voice when you know that you've got them. Mm-hmm. When they say, oh, I appreciate you. And, you walk out of the room and they go, okay, we've got this back under control. So I just recently had somebody who's terribly, terribly ill. For HIPAA reasons, I can't describe much more than that. But she had 3 different problems, any one of which could kill her. And they all kind of came up on her all at once. And, she's frightened to death, the poor thing. But by the end of the encounter, I had her laughing. I'm like, hey, if you can laugh, you're going to be okay. And it was that moment, in her voice where she was just very thankful, and it's like, okay, and because you got the team to back it up. I'm one guy in a trauma center, but this woman had surgeons and critical care specialists and internal medicine specialists and a cardiologist and all of these people coming together to save a human life. I mean, what's not to love about that?
Mm, mm. That is indeed inspiring. I was in therapy earlier this week, and one of the therapists said, sometimes we only laugh when things are that grim. And if you can get somebody from a point of feeling like everything is over to shit, this is just being an adult
Yeah.
and it's hard and you
Yeah, I
can
got a
laugh
problem,
about
but I
it.
also got a solution.
Yes, yes.
Only a problem if you can't solve it.
Let's talk again. I know I'm keeping you too long, but
No,
this
please.
conversation is so great. Let's talk cultural competence. I went to school in San Francisco and felt like I learned a lot about it. How do you navigate, especially cancer, and especially with Latina medicine having so many different alternatives? As you mentioned earlier, the Chinese have their alternatives. I personally had one of the most meaningful experiences of my life being in Africa and going to some traditional shamans where they were just like chopping off bark and saying, drink this as a tea. How do you navigate cultural competence and how do you honor that?
So, medicine, if anything, especially when your training is humbling, you get into medical school and you feel pretty good, right? I got into this, look at me. And, you know, you get humbled again and again. And if you're smart about it, you will realize that you don't know everything and you're not going to leave this world knowing everything. So there's a ton to learn. You know, if I only ever opened my eyes to the allopathic world, I'd be doing okay. We do a lot of good. And early in my career, osteopathic medicine, which was manipulative medicine and try to, all that sort of, we were apart. And we kept an open mind, though. It's like, you never see an osteopathic surgeon. They're just getting, now there's osteopathic surgeons all over the place. And the only way that you can tell an MD from a DO is if you look on their badge. So those worlds kind of merged, right?
Welcome, Stanley Flexner, right there.
There you go. So, and the broader an outlook you keep, the more tools you can bring to help your patients. If I say to somebody, let's go back to mistletoe. They say, I'm going to drink mistletoe no matter what you say to me every day. And I go, well, then I can't take care of you. What have I done? What have I really done? But if I meet you to say, okay, if you're going to do that, one, thank you for telling me. Two, let's just make sure this isn't going to mess with anything else you're doing, right? Every medicine has side effects. Every medicine has interactions. So if I can connect with the patient, I've made much more progress with patients kind of saying, okay, I don't use that in my practice. I understand you think it's of value. Tell me why. Let's see what we can work out here. One of the ones that we really hit our heads against in the last few years was the COVID vaccinations. Everybody's like, oh my God, I'm not going to take it. And a lot of it was very political. And people would just refuse to get vaccinated. And, I asked them a couple of questions. And finally, it seemed to come down to, this one seems to punch through a little bit, is to say, look, you've been vaccinated like 16 times. Measles, mumps, rubella, pertussis, right? Blah, blah, blah. Did your arms fall off? Did you burst into flames? Right? These vaccinations are safe. And by not going like, oh, you're a big dum-dum for not taking the COVID vaccination, they're going to shut me out. But if I start to say, this has been your experience with vaccination before, make a little bit of a joke out of it, right? Try to keep it light. To say, did anything happen? If you look at the vaccine injury rate versus the motor vehicle rate of accidents, you have more chance of being injured going to the appointment than you do getting the shot, right? So if we can talk to people where they are, we have more chance of basically bringing them together. And who knows what we'll find? Maybe mistletoe will be the next great thing, or maybe it'll prove out to be nothing, but there are people testing it is the important part. So, they can assert anything they want. If you want to be on our side of the divide, where I practice, you got to prove it with numbers. I got to see you say, okay, let's use mistletoe again. Mistletoe works. 90 guys who are so much smarter than I am are going to go after that like piranha on a piece of meat. Because if they can prove it right or wrong or whatever, they get your glory, right? So if I can say, oh, no, it doesn't work, then that brings them up. So
They get your glory. You said that earlier. What was the reference?
so the idea that scientists collude to cover things up or anything like that, these are not a cooperative group of people. They are by definition, they will argue about the time of day. They will argue about everything, and they will, even if they agree with you, they will argue with you. So the idea that they would in mass get together to cover something up is not in their behavior patterns that I've ever seen. So, and I did research. My research was less bench research. I did research on domestic violence, which is a little more of a softer scientific kind of thing. It's not physics and math and all like that. But in the science, the scientists and the researchers that I know, like I said, if I can prove you wrong, then I'm better than you, and I go up a notch. And you're going to come back at me, and and they just go back and forth, and that's how it works. We destroy any idea that cannot stand up to the light of day. We're ruthless about it. We will take down no idea is sacrosanct. The guy who can prove Watson and Crick and Franklin wrong wins. But so far they've stood the test of time.
They absolutely have, and so has Francis Kelsey. So, Dr. Kerry Forrestal, thank you so much for coming in and being a guest today on the Lindsay Elmore Show. Take us out and share something that you learned from being in the National Guard.
So, the citizen soldiers, they call them, right? So my family is a military one. We go back to the Spanish-American War. There's a family story that's told that there was an argument amongst the McCullough boys, which is my grandfather on my mom's side, that one side went to the south and one side went to the north in the Civil War. We haven't found anybody who's mustered in, so we're not sure about that one. But the Air National Guard in New York it was the 106th they were rescuing. If you remember The Perfect Storm, it was the unit from that movie. These are it's an incredible gathering of people, because you have people who come from all walks of life, who come together, and then they form the unit that basically goes out and plucks people out and does all these rescues and all like that. And they just have a whole other side to them, where they come together and serve the country and in the military, to the end. It's just always been the coolest thing to me how the National Guard works. The military, the active duty are amazing, but a lot of times it's, young kids, that's all they know. But the National Guard is people who have these amazing other lives, and then they come together to do this function. And that's always just been very cool to me. My time in the Guard, I was basically drug and alcohol abatement and hunting down racists in the military, which was cool. It was great to catch them.
I'm sure it was. And it is honestly one of my favorite things about being an American is the fact that we may stand divided sometimes, but you put a threat against us and we all come together and just use our own skill sets to maintain this country that we love. So
John
Kerry
Meacham wrote a great
Forrestal
book called Soul of America, about times that we've been through like this before and came through it. So if any of your listeners want a good recommendation on a book, John Meacham, Soul of America. My book first, Crushing Cancer. Don't need it, just read it for fun. But, but Soul of America, John Meacham, for the times that we're going through now.
Share with me one more story.
Okay. So this goes back some 5-10 years, I'm not even sure. So I go into one of our rooms and there's a gentleman there and he's got chest pain. And of course, chest pain in the emergency department, we work backwards from a disaster. Chest pain most often is a bad Italian sub. What we look at it's either a heart attack, you dropped a lung, you have a blood clot in your lung, it's got to be something disastrous, right? That's how we think. So I walk into the room, I've already seen the guy's EKG, I know he's not having a heart attack, and he's looking at me, he's a little anxious, we got him simmered down, but his wife she looks at me, and the look in her eyes, I go, something's here. I don't know what it is, but something's here. So I don't know if I had a bad interaction with her or a good interaction with her, but there's a look of recognition. All right. So we go through the case. Guy's going to be fine. His cardiac enzymes check out. His chest x-ray is great. He doesn't have a blood clot. He's going to go to cardiology in the morning. Everything is fine. He's happy. He's now, we got him relaxed. He's doing okay. We make the old joke, okay, we're going to send you home, just, straight home, not to the bar. We just sort of this sort of thing that makes people laugh at the end of the thing, right? Maybe not as funny in the context of what we're just talking about, but still. Now, she gets up as I'm walking out of the room, and I'm here it comes. So we walk out of the room. She follows me out. And I say, how can I help? She goes, you don't remember me. I said, I'm sorry, I don't. She goes, that's okay. She goes, about a year ago, I came in here and I was absolutely awful to you. I said things to you. I was high as a kite, and I regret what I said. But you said something to me, even though I was being that person. And it was, don't you deserve a better life than this? And she said, at first it didn't hit, but it stuck. And then she said, and she has something in her hands, and she pulls it out, and it was her 1-year sobriety coin. And the reason why she was so active, she got her life together. She met this gentleman in rehab. They both got clean. They just got married, and she thought she was about to lose him. So it's one of those things in the ER, 99% of the time I strike out. They tell me to go, jump on a lake, not that politely. But one in 200, maybe, you make it, you break it through. And that's all we can hope for.
I know I can speak to, you never forget the patients that you made a difference. Sure. And you never forget the patients that you almost kill, because that comes with it too, as you are trying to stop and then make a decision. It's very, very, very difficult. You made a difference in her life.
Hopefully still.
There are words. As a woman, I know that the words that men speak over me, that give me life, carry a lot of weight, and the way that women can drag me down also does. So thank you for doing the work that you do.
Absolutely.
It's very hard.
Worthwhile.
Well, and I just will say, everybody go to crushingcancerthebook.com to read more, especially if you have cancer, love someone with cancer, or are a professional dealing with anyone with cancer. Dr. Kerry Forrestal, thank you so much again for being a guest on the Lindsay Elmore Show.
Thank you very much. It was great. I appreciate your time.
The Lindsay Elmore Show is written and produced by me, Lindsay Elmore. Show segments are produced by Sue Frocco and Mike Martin. Sound design and editing is by Jive Media. You can donate to our show by heading to lindsayelmore.com/podcast. Or if you would like to be a supporter of the show, head to lindsayelmore.com/supporter. Your contribution helps us to bring the best guests into our interview chair. Thank you for listening. Subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Share this episode and all of your favorite episodes with a friend and on social media. Be sure to tag @Lindsay Elmore Show and help us bring the pod to more people.